Carl Jung had these insights and never released them in his life. He put them in the secret red book.
I felt like Indiana Jones, the Raiders of the Lost Ark. I felt like I was opening something that no one else had seen.
The greatest intellectual in modernity.
You did eventually part company with Freud, with the publication of your book, The Psychology of the Unconscious.
That was the real cause.
If you make those unconscious things conscious, there was incredible overlap with the symbols that people saw in their dreams and in active imagination.
How could you be sure that your patient wasn't unconsciously recalling something that somebody had told him?
Oh no, quite out of question, because that thing was not known. It was in a magic papyrus in Paris. It wasn't even published. It was not a proof to me, but it was a hint. And I took the hint.
We may know more than we know. We have two minds, or more.
Well, you do know that you have two minds, the conscious and the subconscious.
There's a basis in neuroscience that was later vindicated.
I'd come to meet one of the world's leading brain scientists, Mike Gazzaniga, and a man he's worked with for over a decade. A man with two brains. To control Joe's epileptic seizures, a surgeon severed the connection between the two halves of his brain. His two hands operate as if controlled by two separate brains.
We need more psychology. We need more understanding. We are pitifully unaware of it.
Projection. You've heard of it. The thing that you hate the most, you might have a little bit of. I would understand if you stopped this video now and broke into tears or rage.
Said, why is everybody so mean to me? And he said, why are you so mean to everybody? So I stormed out. And suddenly I realized, sure, he really hit it. And so I phoned Miss Schmidt and asked if I could have an appointment. And she laughed and said, oh, yes, she said, Professor Jung told me to save some time for you. We thought you'd be calling shortly.
You're so afraid of your dark side. The shadow, the anima, these archetypes, he called them. And yet, your dark side has an explanation.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
I will break you open today, and you do not have to be afraid.
I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh, Lord. I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh, Lord. I can feel it coming in the air tonight.
Today I'm going to talk about symbolism through the lens of a man who I believe is the greatest intellectual in modernity, Carl Jung. Carl! He was Swiss, so you gotta probably have a little throat in there. Carl Jung! Jungian psychoanalysis. You may have gone on BetterHelp or gotten yourself a therapist to deal with the anxieties you have around your job and your lack of fruitful relationships. And they may have said, I'm a Jungian. And they may have told you, you gotta meet your shadow. Or get in touch with your inner feminine soul. These are all surface level Jungian insights. And once you dive into the man's greatest work, the Red Book, which was like a personal journal that he developed over his entire life, using the insights that he gained from going into the unconscious mind. It probably already sounds like I'm talking hocus pocus or woo-woo. But truly, there's a basis in neuroscience that was later vindicated by the work of Dr. Ian McGilchrist, for example. You may remember in the 90s when right brain, left brain, pop psychology started to pop off. You know, there was always a book like Draw with Your Right Brain, which is actually a great book. Right brain, right way, or something, or from left to right. You know, it was a symbol that people latched onto. And then a lot of people kind of came down hard on it. They said, this isn't serious. I'm never thinking about the hemispheres of the brain again. And that's where Ian McGilchrist came along. It was like, ho, 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 ho. Look, we've got these individuals that have split brains because there's a little sort of cashew-shaped cluster of nerves in between the hemispheres called the corpus callosum. I wish they'd given it a better name, you know, like Dave or Cheryl. But it's called the corpus callosum, and it's impossible to spell. What the corpus callosum does is communicate between these two distinct hemispheres. And why am I getting into this? Because a lot of people, myself included, believe that this is the neuroscientific explanation for what Carl Jung explored in his life's work. Essentially, he was realizing that we have two minds, or more. We have our conscious stream of thought, stream of consciousness, and that's what we really relate to. You know, that one thought at a time. You may have heard in psychology, you can remember 7 things in your working memory. And this is pretty sad. It's pretty limiting. This is the left brain. Sometimes we call it the logical brain. Of course, that's an oversimplification. It's actually feeling emotions, the left brain. It just happens to mostly feel anger. It's sort of like the spotlight, whereas the right brain is the panoramic image. And isn't that interesting that psychology is now discovering that, you know, when you meditate or when you do lateral eye movement, I think this is why running feels good. When you're doing lateral eye movement and allowing your aperture to expand, your anxiety goes down. Might be because we're allowing the right brain in that moment to come online. Now, I've used neuroscientific metaphors, but the metaphors that Carl Jung used were of people. And he's not so far-fetched. One of those things that you learn in the split brain studies, you know, somebody just doesn't have a corpus callosum or it gets cut. These are great opportunities for psychologists to actually study their theories. Because psychology is pretty soft science, you know. What are you going to use, a survey? People don't even know what they're feeling. It's pretty hard. So neuroscience is exciting. It hasn't been around that long. I think it wasn't that long ago that we didn't know the brain really fired with electricity and that neurons could grow and shape our memories and our thoughts. You know, when people were trying to figure out the human mind, sometimes they thought it was in the blood. You know, if you read like Homer, you'll see little metaphors like, my blood is boiling, but they kind of meant, I'm thinking, you know? A lot of times it's in the gut or the heart. My heart guides me, my gut guides me. And you're like, oh, those idiots. Now we know it's in the brain, in the little jelly. As it turns out, the heart and the gut have immense neuronal activity. What? A lot of these intuitions that great thinkers had throughout history get vindicated by science as time goes on. And I will just say, I'm starting with a disclaimer for the naysayers. This probably is not the video for you. You know, I meet some people who they just want to dismiss. Perhaps you haven't looked into your own depths. Perhaps you haven't peered into the dark abyss of your soul and said, oh, that's there too. Human beings all seem to have the potential for a wide range of behaviors, from pure altruistic self-sacrifice. We've all seen that. The person who jumps on the grenade, the mother who puts her body in front of her daughter and somehow lifts a car, even though normally she can only lift those little pink weights. The reverend or the rector at a church talking about how good he is, and then you find him in a bathroom by a glory hole, even though he was against that. People have a wide range of possibilities, and what Carl Jung realized is if you make those unconscious things conscious, you're not in danger of being possessed by them. You know, maybe your unconscious drives for food and power and sex and what's the other one? I guess that's pretty much it, right? Ego, attention, you know, things like that. If you just pretend, oh, I'm not, like, have you ever met somebody who says they're a good person? They're a terrible person. I'm not egomaniacal. You are. You know, these are the people you really have to worry about. And to give you a little background for how Carl came to these conclusions, well, he studied 10,000 schizophrenics back when we were just beginning to understand what that is. to give you a little context and hopefully humble you a little bit if you're one of these know-it-alls who really know next to nothing. You know more about what they think they know than they actually know, these know-it-alls. They're probably the worst. So, to the know-it-alls, you know, do watch this video, actually. I take it back. Don't run away. This video is for you. I will break you open today, and you do not have to be afraid. By making the unconscious conscious, you tap into the power of the right brain, the unconscious mind, whatever mind's in the heart and gut, and you bring it in through this tiny little cashew into your left brain, the emissary. The one who just goes out for the king and says, "Hello, my lord. I'm here on the king's orders. I can keep the 7 things in my mind at once. The king says that I'm to go and apply for this job and marry this woman or man. And the king is always right." That's your left brain. You think your left brain is the smart half. No. Ian McGilchrist named his book The Master and the Emissary. The master is the right brain. The master has depth, symbolism, myth. According to Carl Jung, it also has a reservoir of perhaps genetic intelligence, our instincts. Do we learn our instincts? No. A kid is just afraid of a snake, but it's not afraid of a fluffy bunny. It just knows. And if you look at other animals, it's like, I guess I'm supposed to go to this watering hole to lay my eggs when the moon is over there, even though I have 5 brain cells. I know how to do that. What? Like, open. Are we getting you to open? Let's humble you some more. Psychology as a discipline was pretty much invented by William James, who you probably don't know about. He's an American philosopher. American philosophy is awesome. It's called pragmatism, and nobody knows about it. And it's super fun to read. Also, Nietzsche is often called, Friedrich Nietzsche is often called the first psychologist because of some of the insights and the work he did. But of course, you didn't have neuroscience at the time. So just in the last 250 years, we've even had a discipline called psychology. That's crazy. And, you know, Carl Jung was working at the turn of the century, the 1900s. So Freud and Jung are not that old. 125 years, you know, they're doing their work, 100, a little over 100. And Freud, you know, he came up with psychoanalysis, put yourself in the chair and let's get some data. Let's see what all these dreams are about. We'll just start there. You know, we don't know what the heck is going on. We'll start with some data. But then, you know, he started doing a lot of cocaine and getting really kind of horny. And so it's really hard to know whether his interpretation of the data was valid. And Carl Jung almost did the same thing. That was the kind of path at the time, to be a very left brain, intellectual, only logical, only thought process, thought devoted human being. And that's exemplified especially in Germany, where of course we saw some of the greatest atrocities in history because of this left brain dominance. So Carl Jung kind of started having some visions. He had a vision of mustard gas underneath barren landscapes with holes that people were going through, and then like 5 minutes later World War I happened. So he was like, oh, maybe these visions and dreams are not only insightful, but they might sort of buck time. They might actually make it possible to have a premonition, or to see how history might repeat itself, what Nietzsche would call the eternal recurrence, what True Detective might call time is a flat circle, in a McConaughey impression. Time is a flat circle. All right. Bingo, bango, bongo, we're back at the beginning. Same age. That was his greatest role, by the way. So we're getting these inklings, these hints that we may know more than we know. And Carl Jung is having these insights. And then he's talking to all these schizophrenic patients. And he's realizing there's an underlying reasonableness to the schizophrenics. They're not just gobbledygook. For instance, I think he had one that was bumping its head against a window. Carl was the first person to ask. You know, normally they would just cut a part of their brain out or medicate them and just say, act normal. We'll cut your brain out until you act normal. Carl was like, let me just ask this guy why he's bashing his head against the window. So he did. And the guy said, well, you know, they're releasing gas into here, so I'm trying to crack the window to get rid of the gas. And Carl was like, whoa, that makes sense. It might not be right, but it makes sense. And also, you know, I just smelled some gas in here. Like, people might be releasing gas accidentally or on purpose. So we don't know whether this schizophrenic was onto something. Hey, stop scratching yourself, buddy. Way to give him some probiotics. I think his biome's all off. So we don't know. Carl eventually had some of these dreams, and he's doing dream analysis, and he's beginning to invent what he would later call active imagination. Active imagination was a sort of technique for having a waking dream, where you could put yourself into a mental landscape. You could do it right now. I'm in a white room. I'm next to a little grove. I'm near a temple. And you say those words, and in your mind's eye, the temple looks like something. The grove looks like something. You don't just say the words, like, I'm seeing a grove right now. You know, the trees are kind of fluffy. It's leading into something. There's like a dark entrance with cobblestones around it. If you ever tried counting sheep, you kind of appreciate how the sheep always look different. Every time I've ever tried it, they look different. And you go, wow, my mind's eye is really interesting. And there are some people who can't even see any images. They're so left brain dominant. For them, I would say try active imagination. Let's get your right brain online. Because I think it is a skill that anyone can develop, not just visual people. So he starts having these active imaginations, and lo and behold, he goes in and he sees maybe a shadow figure. Maybe Salome from the Bible. Maybe the wise old man, Philion something. And you know, Carl had been all over the world, studied all these different religions and symbols, and sometimes you would see a symbol where you'd be like, oh, that's weird. It's like, got a horse's head and a this and a that. Never seen that before. And then like 10 or 15 years later, he'd be in an Egyptian ruin, and he would see that image. He'd be like, whoa, it was so specific. And yet these people saw the same image. So then he started studying human beings and saying, what do you see? What was in your dream? What do you see right now? And what he found was that there was incredible overlap with the symbols that people saw in their dreams and in active imagination. And it started to get him to wonder. You know, he gave some of them names. He coined the term the shadow. The shadow was the name of the whole unconscious mind. To simplify, let's say the right brain. The right brain sees the big picture. The right brain contains most of the dynamic feelings that we have. The right brain kind of tells us who we're supposed to marry when it doesn't make any logical sense. It tells us when we're supposed to quit a job when it doesn't make any sense. It is the realm of omens. Something happened, I don't feel right. You know, when women have intuitions and they say, something's just not right. And their husband's like, be more logical. And they're like, I'm going to call it an aura or an energy. And their husband's like, that's crazy. We can't measure that. And then they turn out to be right. That guy was a diddler. And they kind of sensed it or smelled it. Who knows? But the right brain is the master. It's looking out while the emissary is going through life saying, hey, what's this over here? What's that over there? I wonder if there's something to eat under here. The right brain's like, whoa, it's a tiger. And all of your attention will go to that because it's looking big picture. It's watching. It's the watcher. You may have heard that in sort of mystic circles. The watcher, the seer, behind our consciousness. In another video, I talked about how Eckhart Tolle had this realization when he said, I can't live with myself anymore. He realized there's an I and there's a myself. And I don't really like what the myself is doing, but the I seems to be broader. connected to everything and everyone. And that was the beginning of his spiritual journey, which many millions of people have related to and gotten immense positive outcomes from studying and from meditating, calming the thought process. What is meditation? Stop thinking, they say. Really? It's more like get the left brain out of the way and invite this more symbolic, dynamic, wise person to the table. Why am I calling it person? Well, in those split brain studies I talked about, they did something really interesting where the right brain connects to the left hand and the left brain connects to the right hand. The eye that is connected to the left brain might see an apple, and then that right hand can write down apple. Okay? Now, if you only show the eye that's associated with the right brain, the left hand might draw an apple. But then you ask the person, because remember, it's only seeing out of the eye associated with the right brain, what are you seeing? And the conscious part of the brain goes, nothing. I can't see anything. What? But meanwhile, your left hand is drawing an apple, and they ask you, are you seeing any kind of fruit? And you say, none at all. And you're drawing an apple. What does that mean? That means there are at least two persons inside your mind. Okay? If you need more proof, go and study split brain. I haven't explained it well. You may have heard of the multiple selves theory. It says there might be a bunch of people, a gang of people inside our mind. So we have all this neuroscience which proves there's at least two people inside of you. And now imagine how much you've neglected one of them with your preference for thoughts, for feeling like you know everything, for getting angry, for focusing, hyper-focusing. What do we hear? Single task. That's the sort of self-help mantra. Single task on one thing until you're Tiger Woods. Well, then what happens when Tiger Woods feels a little bit of sexiness, a little bit of mojo? He ruins his whole life. He becomes, like a simp for a bunch of blonde chicks and ruins his marriage and his career. It's because he was so hyper-focused on hitting this little ball. He should have done active imagination. He should have heard from his right brain, from his unconscious, and really understood its wisdom rather than being possessed by it in a moment of weakness. Possession is what happens to the schizophrenic patients that Carl Jung was studying. Their right brain is so fed up with being neglected that it just takes over. And this is a good example of how the right and left brain work. My right brain this morning was like, let's break down chess and give you some of the greatest insights you've ever had in your life. And I was like, I got to tell the people about this. But then my left brain was like, the people are going to think you're a freaking idiot if you don't explain neuroscience and Carl Jung, the basis for this stuff. You're just going to sound like an idiot. And so that's how the left brain protects us. Interestingly enough, Carl Jung had these insights and never released them in his life. He put them in the secret red book. His active imaginations, which were like waking dreams, where he met the shadow, he met his anima, his feminine soul. And you got to just understand, he's sitting with his eyes closed. You can do this, okay? Go on Spotify, search guided active imagination, and you'll find some really good ones. I'll link them in the description. Follow that link. You'll see how easy it is for you to have great insights. The imagery was so impactful to Carl Jung. It tapped into such deep parts of his wants and desires and, maybe even his ancestors. Sometimes I think I'm speaking to my ancestors when I'm sitting in the park doing an AI, active imagination. It's very interesting. Remember I talked about the right and left brain being able to work simultaneously as though you had two persons? This is why we have a Socratic dialogue. You can ask yourself a question and get an answer that you didn't expect. Isn't that weird? You might hear a voice that you call divine. The voice, I've called it. And go, where does that come from? Well, for now, just say it comes from the right brain, because we've proven that. Start with the fact that you have two persons inside of you. Are you going to reckon with that today? Because I feel like most people haven't reckoned with that. They think they're one person, they've got it all figured out. You're having a dialogue with yourself right now. So if you're arguing with your spouse, just understand it's because you're also arguing with yourself. And this is where we get the term projection. If anybody's heard of Carl Jung, it's probably the term projection. What does projection mean? It's one of the most interesting concepts ever and so explanatory in the modern world. Remember that priest or reverend I told you about who's really against gays and then all of a sudden is in the bathroom with the glory hole? What he hated in others, he hated so personally because deep down he knew it was in himself and he was deathly afraid of that part of himself. Why else would you take something so personally? I'll give you an example. You know, the rudest person on earth in my life might be the homeless guy that lives under the underpass. He screams at me. I have to carry a machete with me now because he screams and, you know, he wants to, who knows what he wants to do with me, but he's very mean, okay? He says, you're a piece of shit. You ever met somebody like this? They might be like one of Carl Jung's patients, you know, who's kind of had their shadow take over unconsciously, and it's wreaking havoc on the world around them. They're not in control anymore. Their left brain's gone offline. It sounds like I'm talking a lot of crap about the left brain or the logical process. I'm not. When you don't have it, you become that, and that's no good. But my point is, when that crazy underpass person screams at me, I don't go home and think about it. I forget it the moment I'm out of the underpass. I go, because there's nothing I relate to about that guy. Therefore, I'm not projecting anything onto him. If a polar bear eats your dog, you don't spend a lot of time going, I need to tweet or X about how much I hate polar bears and resent them day and night. I need to watch polar bear content proving how bloodthirsty they are. No, you just know a polar bear does polar bear things and you don't relate to that, so it doesn't bother you that much. This is a very uncomfortable thought. What I'm essentially telling you is the thing that you hate the most, you might have a little bit of. That's like shots fired. I would understand if you stopped this video now and broke into tears or rage. Projection. You've heard of it, okay? So, what's a good example? I'll be vulnerable for a second. I'm throwing a lot of heat, so I might as well be vulnerable, put some skin in the game. You know, I'm in touch with my unconscious and I've merged my opposites. If I had to look into what I resent, and maybe you can do this yourself, it might be like selfish people. You know, I might be, they're so selfish. Can you believe they did this, this, this? So if I want to call myself out, I might go, Devin, there might be a part of your shadow that wants to be more selfish. Maybe that's why it bothers you so much when you see other people indulging in it. And you have, through your left brain, given yourself no permission to be selfish. Maybe you haven't even gone into the depths of your soul and your psyche to say, what's the wisdom behind selfishness? Let my shadow appear. And this was my first act of imagination. I used the Spotify method. You will have a great result if you do the same. And so the Spotify told me, okay, take a few breaths. We're going to bring on the imagery. Imagery is what the right brain uses as its language. That's why it creates your dreams. You ever thought about how your dreams work? Now you know. It's your right brain person giving you a nice movie and digesting all your knowledge and putting it in place with all the great wisdom that resides in the depths of you. Okay? So now the imagery. Let's say we're walking down a hallway. It's white. I can see that. There's a door. The knob is brass. Interesting. Open the door. Okay. Here we go. Open. Dark hallway. Okay. Steps. Go down the steps. Walking down the steps, walking down the steps, walking down the steps. Emerge into a forested area. Okay? And this isn't me active imagination now. I'm recounting the first one I had. The forested area up here is, it's kind of dark. There's, just like the hallway, it's dark. Okay, it's beautiful though. I can't smell it, but I can see it. A figure emerges. That figure is Severus Snape from Harry Potter. Oh, there's my ex-girlfriend smoking a cigarette. She doesn't smoke. Or didn't. Maybe she does. Okay. Ask them a question. And you know this takes longer, but I'm speed running it for you. I'm a little... First look at them. Like, what's their vibe? Well, Severus is kind of, like, totally ambivalent. Like, he barely even noticed that I'm here in his home, I guess. It's kind of like when you come up to a big, ferocious animal, and they're aware of you, but they're just disinterested. You know how they say the opposite of love is not hate, it's ambivalence? That's how I would describe these folks. Ambivalent. Even my ex. She's just kind of smoking like, oh, this guy again? Let's see what he does. You know, ambivalent. Okay, ask Snape and your girlfriend a question. Well, my girlfriend is glad I'm here. She's glad I'm finally going into the depths instead of thinking so freaking much. I don't know when she started smoking, but that must represent something too. Okay, what about Snape? I want to ask Snape, what do you think of me? No words yet. Am I doing it wrong? No, it's just my first act of imagination, and maybe I need more practice. Or maybe there's something significant about the no words. Silence. I'll focus on his vibe instead then. Even though I'm imagining this, the character that I didn't choose to imagine, that just emerged, has a vibe. It's ambivalence. Okay, so I stop, you know. Okay, but you can't just leave. You gotta go. Thanks, guys, bye. First time down here, unless I'm dreaming. So, great to meet you all. This was really weird. I still think it's just kind of some voodoo bullshit for now. But that was kind of weird. That was interesting. I didn't expect that. That's interesting that my shadow, which I thought just meant my evil side or my bad side, wasn't bad or evil. It was Snape. So then I go out, you know, bye guys. Okay, back up the stairs, open the door, back into the hallway. Boom, we're out. You can't just leave them. You know, you gotta say, it's like, be respectful. They invited you into their home. Remember, we are assuming that there might be actual persons associated with these conscious symbols, and they might use the symbols. Jung had a great quote that was like, you know, the shadow, the anima, these archetypes, he called them. You may have heard of archetypes from Joseph Campbell. He just pulled that from Jung and made it better, okay? So if you like Joseph Campbell, you have to like Carl Jung, because he's like the originator. You got to give props to the originator. So Carl Jung would say we all have the different archetypes: the shadow, the wise old man, the maiden, the queen, the fool, the inner child, you know, all of these things that we see over and over again. We all have them, but they wear the skin of our culture. So they come to life in forms that we're more familiar with. And some forms we're not. That's the thing. Sometimes they just appear, and you're like, I've never seen that in my life. But that must have some resonance in my deep unconscious mind. So the shadow we've all heard of, the anima we've all heard of, maybe this is my first step into meeting them. And like Carl, who became convinced over his entire lifetime from engaging with these things, and, you know, was able to re-engage with the same entities in his mind, he believed they were persons. Persons living in a realm that he called the depths, the unconscious, that may connect us. You know, that's what he called the collective unconscious. We might all... You ever like hear... You ever think horoscopes are stupid? Which they are. But like, they might be onto something deeper. Because sometimes I'm like, wow, everybody's annoyed today. Have you ever had that? It's like, what is like Mercury in retrograde or something? And you wonder, like, why is everybody annoying today? Or why is everybody happy today? You know, there might be something to the collective unconscious. We don't even know where consciousness is. We thought it was in the brain, but the great people who study consciousness scientifically, they think we might be like an antenna for it. And it might be in the air. It might be in this table. Everything might have an element of consciousness. It might be like matter. It might be a part of matter. that matter itself is conscious in some reducible, minuscule way, and that we emerge, we accumulate from the consciousness around us. Or there's people who think it's in the brain and it emerges from the neuronal connections. The idea that neurons firing somehow makes a self, a feeling, a qualia of me-ness. You know what I'm talking about? You're not just an automaton. You're not an AI. I'm feeling there's a qualia to me being in this room, and I don't know where it is. How did it emerge from fireworks? It's there. Like when you play a video game, you see it. You're in that point of view. But I can't get in your point of view, and you can't get in mine. But I know you have a point of view. There's a quality to being you beyond just firing deterministic left, right. Then we'd be a robot. So this is what, people who study consciousness, artificial intelligence, things like that, they have to contend with. Anyway, what were we saying? So to bring it back to Carl and to my first AI, I then went and wrote down some of these insights. One insight I had is that my shadow is Snape. Therefore, it's not good or bad. Snape is someone who appears bad for the first 2 Harry Potter books or something. He's the bad guy. He's scary. And then as it goes on, sorry for the spoiler, but you've had time to read that, so it's your fault. It turns out he was a great protector of Hogwarts and was probably friends, I can't remember, with Harry Potter's dad and mom, who were, by all accounts, beautiful, noble, virtuous people that everyone agreed. But Snape, not everyone agrees. Some people think he's villainous. But when you find out his true motivation, he was protecting Hogwarts the whole time. And so I took that as a lesson that whatever this shadowy figure is, who doesn't give a crap about me, he's focused on protecting the bigger picture. Hogwarts, maybe the unconscious realm itself. And he's so focused that he could give 2 rats booties what I think, or what he doesn't even think of me. The Mad Men quote? The guy goes up to Don Draper and says, "What do you think of me?" And Don Draper says, "I don't think of you." That was the vibe of Snape. And so I learned 2 things. I learned that my shadow is neither good nor bad. It's just completely ambivalent to what other people think of it. And that there's a feminine aspect to my shadow, which is the anima, as Jung called it, my feminine soul. And it appeared in the form of an ex-girlfriend that I had projected a lot of resentment towards because things hadn't worked out. And here she was. Maybe my resentment and being a little bit obsessed with what she did for so long was my shadow's way of possessing me, projecting onto other people the thing I had neglected in myself. There was something I was attracted to about her that I wasn't willing to acknowledge and make conscious in myself and merge with. And so I sought it out in her, and then I also resented her for having it and being so ambivalent towards me, towards the end, when she had every right to do that. You're not entitled to someone's attention, love, devotion. Before I had made my unconscious conscious, that was kind of running me, and it was leading to some resentment. So by going into this first AI, I met her. She was glad that I was finally opening up to this deeper wisdom within myself. The master, the shadow, the anima, my feminine side, my feminine soul. That was interesting, so I wrote that down. And then the Snape stuff was interesting, so I wrote that down. So what does this all mean? It means that you're so afraid of your dark side. And yet, your dark side has an explanation. It's not good or bad. It's completing you. It's the whole. A lot of people think that God and Jesus were just perfect choir boys in the way that they're presented. But Jesus flipped a lot of tables. And if you really look at what he was doing, he was kind of just talking shit. He was kind of just going where hallowed ground. You're not supposed to talk shit, like the temple or the Pharisees or the Romans. And he was being a mix of like super accommodating, forgiving, and nice, but also like hey, you're a hypocrite. You guys are a brood of vipers. Like, he was talking that shit. The Jesus that we get is the choir boy, the Mormon, the Ned Flanders Jesus. But there's also a side of Jesus that came to bring a sword. So that's a side of Jesus you don't hear about a lot, right? We'd kind of almost rather him be like the Buddha and just be one-sided. But the Buddha had this whole journey when he was Siddhartha, where he slang that D. You know, he got real rich, powerful. What else did he do? He had many forms. He became a Brahma. So all these stories, when you dig in deeper, you realize they've kind of left out the shadow side, left out the more complex dark side, and the symbolism, and the myth, and all of that. It wasn't convenient to include, so they left it out. And this is why going to church can be so frustrating, because all you're getting is the Ned Flanders side. Everybody's judging everybody. You're right. You're right for feeling that way if you've left the church. But Carl Jung gives us a way to become whole. He called it the union of the opposites. There was a wise old man within him that was good and rational and logical and, you know, that he related to. He had no problem saying, yeah, that's me. And then there was this other side that was like more shadow. Maybe in his case it was more feminine. Was loving and emotive. And I remember Salome is a character in the Bible that brought John the Baptist's head on a platter. And Carl goes, oh gosh, I don't like this. You know, maybe he had mommy issues. This is what women be cutting heads off out here. And Salome was like, what? No, I love you. I love you. Do you love me? And he's like, I can't love you. You got a head on a platter. And she's like, I know. And then the wise old man was like, we're together. And Carl Jung goes, what? No. She's bad, you're good. And he says, until you understand that she has a reason and I have a reason and we represent the opposites and you merge those, you will never be whole. You will be possessed by your inner drives. You'll end up like Freud, just a cocaine-addicted sex addict. And I have bigger dreams for you. So Carl kept going back. He kept understanding. He kept meeting new persons. Kept looking at his dreams. And he put all this in the red book. And he learned how to draw just so he could draw some of the imagery. Can you imagine? I did too. I started doing the AIs and I got really good at drawing because it's the only way to put some of the imagery down. You can write down what happened, but you really need the images. Crazy things. I'll go through my notes one day to give you all a taste. The real thing I notice is that these images are so evocative, so archetypical, so interesting, that I could literally just pull them off the page and shoot them as a scene in a movie. You know, these great movies that we call them visionary filmmakers. You know, Geiger, whoever the guy Jodorowsky, he almost made Dune. You know, so imagery intense, and real film buffs love these guys. I think they were probably just taking images from their unconscious mind or their right brain and sort of honoring those images and just recreating them. And that's what Carl Jung learned how to draw to do. And he never released this red book. Why? Because the same people who are like haters in the YouTube comments will go, this is a meandering, useless video, and you lied to me, and I will never watch a video again. You're probably angry at me for a reason. And now I've given you some tools to explore what might be projection. Because I've done nothing wrong to you. You shouldn't be this angry. And you're not angry at the homeless guy that yells at you on the road. Or polar bears. So those things are worse than me. Right? Objectively. Maybe not the homeless guy, but the polar bear, for sure. It just eats its own baby sometimes. And yet you love the polar bear. You know, you probably watch Disney movies about bears, and you probably had a teddy bear as a kid. So if you can love a teddy bear and a wolf and things that eat their babies, you shouldn't be this angry at me. And you've got to ask yourself, why am I projecting this onto this man who didn't mean no wrong? And I hope that you will use this as an excuse to just say, you know what, I meditate on Spotify and it hasn't done anything really in the last year and a half. I just kind of think with my eyes closed, as Sam Harris said. And everybody promises everything, but I've only had brief glimpses where something more almost like supernatural happens, almost psychedelic when I meditate, but it's few and far between. I would encourage you to try active imagination instead and see if it's not a more fruitful form of meditation. What do you have to lose, really? It'll take 15 minutes. What's so great about this is you could prove the validity of what I'm saying in 15 minutes. And I guarantee you something interesting will happen if you have a shred of openness. If you go into it trying to disprove me, I guess you'll just stay exactly where you are. The same might go for understanding what divinity is, or if there's a greater intelligence, what we call a higher power. If you say no, definitely no, you're not agnostic, but you're atheist. You say, I don't know what it is, but I know it's not that. Even though 99.9% of people in history have thought it was that. Have a little humility. You're basically saying everyone who's ever lived was wrong. And the most important thing that guided their life was wrong, and they were idiots. And there's only a rounding error of people, myself included, that really get it. And of course you want to hold on to that, because that probably feels really good to be that special. So in order to maybe meet God, you might have to kill that side of yourself. That side that says, I'm the 0.1% who really gets it. And I'm sorry, but I think you should. And another way to verify that is to pray. You've never prayed. Or maybe you did pray and then you got burned. But you remember praying and it worked. You remember talking to God. You remember. You miss it. Every single person I meet who grew up in the church and became an atheist, they go, I miss that feeling of peace and love and not being alone. I did talk to God, but I guess I was just wrong. Okay. And for the other people, you've never prayed. Because I never prayed. I was the best atheist in the world. I read Sam Harris, Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, the third horseman. Never even heard of him. I read him extensively, studied him, top 100 university. Christopher Hitchens, my hero for many years. So you're not a better atheist than me, unless you're one of those four guys. Not even the other debater is a better atheist than me. I forget what his name is. But gosh, he's cringe, man. Real cringe. And they also have weird ideas when you dig in a little deeper. A lot of weird, sick stuff. Just saying. Dig in a little deeper. They've been possessed by some really dark things because they're not being honest with themselves. So I'm a great atheist. You're not better than me at that. But I made a prayer. One prayer. And it worked better than anything I've ever done. It was answered miraculously in 2 months and gave me things that I'd never had. So that made me a little more open. But it took another 10 months. The prayer was answered and I didn't even acknowledge it for another 10 months, even though I promised. My promise was, God, if you give me all these things, I might believe in you a little more. Or I might open. It would be a bit of evidence. I'm rational, so I need evidence. I said this to God and I didn't keep my end of the bargain until a year later, when I was walloped again and all those things I prayed for were taken. And I've told this story before, but it doesn't hurt to reemphasize it, that then I prayed again. And this time I thought about the symbol of Jesus Christ. And something hit me when I heard that he was being tortured and he was only concerned about his torturers. He said, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. So instead of being angry, he was worried about his torturers. And I thought, that changed me. That symbol, it landed. And I became a different person in that moment. And it persisted for many months. I was much more loving. I was a different guy just from hearing, letting that symbol land, what that means. What it meant to me was that that's a miracle of sorts, to be tortured and to be genuinely showing loving concern for your torturers, because your understanding is so great that they're not doing the torturing, they're being possessed to do the torturing. and that you actually feel bad for them for being possessed, even though they're torturing you. What I realized in that moment is that's the most loving thing I've ever heard of. I think that single act changed the world and spread the message of the way, as it was called back then, not Christianity. And Christianity just means king. So it's not his name. So, but the way spread around the whole world, because I think that selfless action was witnessed by a crowd, and it made the same impact that it made on me to that crowd. And they said, I've never seen anyone do that. I go online, I watch all the videos. I've heard about the black mom who went to court and somebody killed her son in a drive-by, and she says, I forgive you. And it makes the kid weep because he knows I killed your son and you're forgiving me. And then when he gets out of prison, the black mom adopts the kid and changes him. Like, that's the best form of love I've ever seen. The black mom forgiving the drive-by shooter. You just a kid. You just a little kid, just like my son. And I know it's not you. I know God is real and God is good and God's gonna forgive you. I'm gonna adopt you even though you killed my son. Like, that was the height of love that I knew about. I've never heard of someone being tortured and killed and saying, please, please help this person. Forgive this person. Do not punish them for this. It's not their fault. Give them a way out. Never heard of that. But what's interesting is it's, in my mind, a miracle because it's never been observed. But it's an emotion. It's a heart posture, as followers of Christ call it. And anyone could do it. It doesn't require walking on water. So that's the only miracle I care about. I don't really talk about the other ones because anyone could do it and I've never seen it. That's so interesting to me. And that symbol changed me. So we got off on a tangent there. That's sort of the name of the game for this video. But hear me now when I say that Carl Jung also felt that through the unconscious could be found the self with a capital S. The enduring self that might be represented by the story of Christ, which is why it appeared to him as Christ. So there might be something to these stories, these symbolisms, and it might be worth spelunking into your own depths. And you might say, well, then I'll just make videos that are gobbledygook like this and don't follow a prescribed linear pattern that are predictable. And I know what I'm getting. Well, I think it was pretty awesome. But now you've gotten a very freewheeling, almost musical. See how I weaved in and out of things? Hallelujah, hallelujah. There's my buddy. Yes, see how he responds to music? Love you. So I thought this video ruled. And for those of you who agree, please follow for more. This is the devolution, as we've said. We are getting out of the way of ourselves. We are allowing the master, the unconscious, the right brain, the heart neurons, the stomach neurons, the collective unconsciousness, instincts, intuitions, math, art, science, childlike wonder, to all have a seat at the table. And then we're going to begin making that experience conscious so that we can be full individuals, full humans. And why do I think you don't have to be afraid? Well, number one, that's the most common refrain in the Bible. Be not afraid, be not afraid, be not afraid. Number two, I received that wisdom to quit fear underneath the fig tree, which was later revealed to be significant in the Bible on the first page of the Bible that I read. You know, one of those weird serendipities is what Jung called them. And number three, when you go into the unconscious, the part of yourself that you are most afraid of makes itself known and understood. And the truth is not as scary as you thought. The truth is, you do have a feminine side. Your girl has a point with all the horoscopes and tarot cards and systems of symbolism that she finds instructive. She is more right-brained. Women have a more even right and left brain. Men are more lateralized, meaning the left brain is bigger. Women also have a larger corpus callosum, So the dialogue between the two is more clear. The benefit for them is that they're walking in balance and power. That's very demonstrable in the modern world. Women are killing it. Men, the value we have is that we can kind of make all of this chaos from the wisdom of the depths, all of the persons that exist within us. We can take it, instead of becoming reactive or a little bit possessed by it. Ladies, get a little possessed sometimes by those emotions, just saying. What men can do and how we can lead is to honor those insights and those forms of wisdom, make them conscious, dialogue with them, the Socratic dialogue, great invention by one of the boys, Socrates. Make them conscious. You know, he called it his daimon, this muse, it's often called, the muses. And great men have an element of this. You always see, yes, they're logical like Ian McGilchrist, but they play violin like Einstein or something. They always have, you know, they're sort of romantic in some kind of way. They always have those two sides. And that's what men are great at doing. Making that conscious and hopefully communicating that to the world in a way that's a little more interesting than a tarot card reading, which is only going to appeal to mostly middle-aged housewives. So I hope I've accomplished that today. I hope I've whet your beak. We're going to be diving in a lot more. The depths are the gift that keeps on giving. They give me a unique insight every time I read them. The holy texts, the Eastern traditions, the art, you know, things that are a little hard to just reduce and say, this is this, and that's it. There is no unconscious. God is a fairy tale. You said it because you don't want to die. Then why do I ask God to kill me if he wants to every day? Why am I not afraid of death anymore? I don't even think about heaven. I think about that miracle Christ, I believe, did of forgiving his torturers. That's what I think about. And I dig into these texts. And people go, read this out of context. It doesn't sound right. None of it's going to sound right until you go and really take your whole brain and bring it to the fore and say, give me something. What are we dealing with here? I'm open. I'm humble. I'm not going to dismiss. That was a very important word that came to me during my spiritual awakening. Open. Didn't think that, because a lot of people call spiritual people closed-minded. I had to become open-minded. So I'll end it there because my camera's dying and we've gone too long. And in my next video, I will use chess the way Carl Jung used tarot cards to say, I don't believe in tarot. I don't believe that chess is real. It's a game. But I believe it's a symbolic system that has persisted for a long time because it speaks to people's unconscious right brain side. And it has great insights to give to us about how people interact in the world, how we get ahead, the battle of our lives, and where we might be different in the modern world than we've ever been. Because if you made chess today, just like if you updated the tarot cards, they'd be a little different. It's not exactly the same. We're getting into new territory now. So, hope you subscribe. Hope I actually make that video. And I love you all for watching. Thank you so much. All right, Washington. Let's go.